What's going on, everybody? Teach back again with another video, and today I'm actually bringing you my first 2-round 2024 NFL mock draft. I just thought after the week having off, I thought, hey, now's the time to be able to dive a little deeper in this class, get an extra round's worth into each mock draft. So this is going to become the norm moving forward. So excited to bring this video your way. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Hit the like button if you do. Subscribe if you want to see more mock drafts, more football content in general. And of course, leave me your thoughts down below in the comments section. Who went too high? Who went too low? Who's your favorite team? What'd you think about the 2-round haul that I gave your squad? Also, there are going to be plenty of trades. This is about as many trades as I've done in any mock. I tend to be a little bit more reserved here. They're hard to predict, but hey, it's the end of October. Let's have some fun here. Let's talk about some potential trade scenarios. So, with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right into it, starting with the Chicago Bears at pick 1. I'm still going to go Caleb Williams here. I know it hasn't been as pretty the last couple of weeks, but I think that really just stems from his time to throw, especially in a clean pocket, is pretty high. That, and then of course you got the whole narrative about him versus ranked teams. I'm not really buying into that. I just think better teams obviously just come with better pass rush, and because of that, just like any other quarterback, he's not as good against pressure in his face, and he's just got to clean up and be able to play more within the system. So at the NFL level, I just want to see him be able to take 1st and 10, that 5-yard hitch that makes it 2nd and manageable. I think it's just those little things. And teaching a guy to play within a system is a lot easier than a guy who plays within the system and doesn't have the special. Williams obviously has the special. He can do all those crazy stuff. Like, honestly, there's a lot of Mahomes comps. To me, it's more like prime Aaron Rodgers, where he extends the play and makes a throw that will have your jaw on the floor. He can do all that stuff. So I think it's relatively easy to be able to move him into a system, be able to teach him and take those easy throws. Because once he starts doing that, there's not much in his game that I can nitpick on from there. All right, number 2 pick. Let's go with the Arizona Cardinals taking Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, they just need a clear-cut number 1 guy. I like Michael Wilson and Rondale Moore, a nice little, spunky, kind of gadget player. But, Marvin Harrison Jr. is a clear tier above all those guys. And I think it just gives, Kyler Murray, assuming he is the guy moving forward, the dude that he needs on the outside to be able to win consistently. So, to me, he's the number 2 player in this class. I do take position value into account on my big board, so I have it Caleb, then Marvin. But, obviously, no wrong selection there for Arizona, especially if they are going to stick with Kyler Murray. Then, QB's kind of out of play. Let's go ahead and give him a bona fide number 1 target. That's Marvin Harrison Jr. Maserati Marv, as I heard Gus Johnson say about 1,000 times in the Penn State broadcast. All right, then we get to the number 3 pick, and I had kind of talked about in some previous mocks, I want to explore what Chicago could get by trading down from 2. Here we're going to have them do that just at the number 3 overall spot. I'm going to have the Minnesota Vikings come up. So, this is Mock Draft Database. This is their trade engine. Don't yell at me if you're like, that competition's not even. It makes the trade go through, so that's all I'm really worried about. We're going to have the Vikings move up to the number 3 pick and select Drake May. Kirk Cousins, it was a pseudo audition, I guess you could say, for him and the 49ers on Monday Night Football last week. He looks great. He's been playing well. He's been playing really well this year. And every couple of years, you get, every year really, you get a different mid-tier quarterback who steps up and looks like they might be on that, top 8 fringe. Some years it was Derek Carr, some years it's Dak Prescott. Now it's, Kirk Cousins this season. But he's not under contract for next season. They're looking for a long-term answer. And I think pairing up, seeing what Drake May can do with Tez Walker makes me just uber excited to think about what he could do with Justin Jefferson. And it's been good to see Drake be able to get that number 1 target in that UNC offense, to see what he could do when he's not having to, share it between 6 to 8 different, pass catchers. He's got a dude he can lean on. And I think in Minnesota he'd have that. They have one of the best tackle tandems in the league. They have a great offensive-minded head coach. This is him stepping into a great situation. Just got to patch up that interior offensive line a little bit, and he's in a great spot for success. Next, we get the Denver Broncos. Thought about edge, done that a couple of times in these videos. So I'm going to go with Olu Fashanu. To me, the best pass protector in this class. And look, after you get the comments of Garrett Bowles saying, I'm tired of losing, it's safe to say he's not going to be in Denver next year, right? So I think they're looking for a long-term answer there at left tackle. And, I totally think quarterback could be in play here. I think it's easier to make that decision if Drake May, Caleb Williams, these, top-tier elite prospects are still on the board. Now we're starting to get into a tier below that, so I'm going to say they're going to opt to figure it out with Russell Wilson. Do think he's playing a little bit better with Sean Payton. And I think they could choose a long-term upgrade over Garrett Bowles either way. So this could be them kind of addressing the offense, Sean Payton getting one of his guys in the building, but it does come with the caveat that you're probably sticking with Russell Wilson. All right, then we get to the New York Giants here at pick number 5. I'm going to go Malik Neighbors. I think Keon Coleman right now is probably my wide receiver 2, and the Neighbors at 3, but it's really close between the two. And it comes down to, you want 6'4", former basketball player who can jump out of the roof and maybe does a little bit more in those contested catch, deep down the field targets than Neighbors does. That being said, Neighbors is aggressive coming back to the football. Like, this guy on the intermediate stuff is going to be awesome. Such a fluid athlete, and you really see it in his route running, both getting to top speed, but also decelerating, right? Going from 100 down to 0. It's the same stuff that I laud about with Justin Jefferson, where it's like, that's special. Neighbors, maybe not to Justin Jefferson's level, but he's got that same type of ability to de-throttle, de-escalate, go from top speed down to 0, and it gets DBs flying all over the field. Love his hands as well. Plays a little bit bigger than his size. And the Giants need a dude, right? And I think you pairing him up with Jalen Hyatt, you have a deep threat, and then you have Neighbors who could do just about everything else. Feels like a nice 1-2 punch there long term in New York. And again, this is kind of having to swallow the pill of saying it's going to probably be Daniel Jones for one more year. So that's kind of the downside if you're a Giants fan. Next, the New England Patriots. This is a real easy mock, very chalky. Sorry, Pats fans. I've gone off to tackle. I've done some wide receivers. Here's Brock Bowers. Bowers tends to be a guy I feel slipping my mock for no reason. So I didn't want to have that happen here. And Hunter Henry's not going to be under contract next year. Mike Gesicki's on a one-year deal. They're looking for a long-term guy. And I don't know if Bowers is the next Gronk, because I don't know if he'll be that elite level of a run blocker. He's a pretty good college run blocker. We'll have to wait and see how his weight specifically carries and how that impacts his run blocking at the next level. But what you are going to get is either a high-end slot receiver or an awesome receiving threat at the tight end spot. I'm kind of in between on where I think he'll end up playing. I could kind of see him pseudo being Mike Gesicki and just basically playing big slot. But I also think that, despite his size, he plays tight end really well at the college level, and he does in the SEC. So maybe there is more room for translation there at the NFL level. So we'll have to see what his true position is and what it ultimately ends up being. I'm making this selection with the thought in mind that he's the tight end of the future. And another one of these teams where it's like, I guess you're going with Mac Jones. But we have a second round in this mock draft, so I'm not going to say that just yet for the New England Patriots. Little teaser there. Next, the Green Bay Packers. Really boring one here. I'm going to go Joe Alt. Look, I like Zach Tom, but I just think moving beyond David Bakhtiari, it's time to address this position and doing so in a meaningful way. Not re-signing Josh Nijman for like a couple $1 million a year. Not hoping a day three, first contract player is going to be David Bakhtiari, right? Let's go ahead and make a major investment in this position. Let's draft a first-round tackle. I think Olu and Alt should both go in the top 10. And I think Alt's that level of a special player. And he's a better run blocker than Olu, but maybe sacrifices a little bit because he's not an elite pass protector. That being said, he's been fantastic this season for Notre Dame in pass protection. I just think he's a little slow out of his stance and getting into the kick slides. But other than that, and I'm obviously nitpicking there, he's an elite level tackle. Like he's a really special player. And again, I actually have him over Olu just because I think he's a little more well balanced. But you can't go wrong with either one of these guys. I think it's time for Green Bay to go ahead and address that position in a big way. Move Zach Tom back to right tackle. Let's go ahead and keep that offensive line as a strength as it has been over the last half decade to a decade. Then we get to the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm going to do something a little different here. I haven't had Cooper DeJean be the first DB off the board. And man, just seeing his kick return the other week, it's like, dude, this is a DB that moves so well. And he does it at a very big frame, too. And then you look at his background. I mean, all-star baseball player in high school, and a freaky basketball player, and then an all-world track athlete as well. And then, of course, he picks football, and he's a stud on special teams. He's awesome in coverage, too. And right now he's playing outside corner. Ultimately, and I kind of have a video, I think, coming out next weekend. Don't hold me to that, but I'm basically working on a little bit more of an editorial video where I think slot corner is going to become the most important position in the secondary. So come back and check that out. And that's where I hope DeJean finds himself. Because I look at the impact that a Brian Branch and a Trent McDuffie and a Devon Witherspoon have had. I think DeJean could have that same type of impact. He's a willing tackler. He's great in the run game. Big, tall, stout, strong guy, too. Whether it's zone, you're just having him kind of lurk over the middle of the field, or it's playing man and taking away those easy throws. I see a lot of impact for DeJean potentially as that slot, corner, strong safety hybrid. But also the Chargers, if he plays outside, I mean, they desperately need an upgrade there. They need someone to partner up with Asante Samuel Jr. Michael Davis isn't it. J.C. Jackson's obviously not there anymore, so either way you spin it, this is a big upgrade for that secondary that desperately needs it. All right, then we get to the Tennessee Titans, and this is going to be our second trade of the video. And we had Chicago trade back, and now I love when teams, move back and then use some of those, resources, that ammunition, so to speak, to be able to move back up. So I'm going to have Chicago and Tennessee trade places here, and we'll say it's a third-round pick. Again, don't get mad at me. Yell at the trade machine. It makes the trade go through, so that's all I'm really worried about. Chicago moves up to number 9. I'm going to have him take Jared Verse. Honestly, I think I'm at the point where I think Latu is my number 1 edge, just because he's so refined. Like, there's not much work that needs to be done with Latu, but Verse has a little bit more upside from an athletic standpoint, and honestly, I think he's gained a little too much weight. the bulk that he had from Albany to Florida State to be able to get to like 245, I think was the right move, and it kind of put him at SEC playing level. But like now I'm hearing that he's like mid 250s, maybe even pushing close to 260. And it feels like he's lost a little bit of explosiveness. Maybe we've gone a bridge too far there with Verse. So hopefully he can slim back down and get closer to that 245, maybe even 250, 255 neighborhood, and kind of shed some of that weight if he's truly at 260, gain some of that explosiveness back. And I was expecting him to be spectacular this year. Maybe that's not fair. He's been good, just not spectacular. But I still think he's a high-end run defender, sets the edge really well, really good athlete. And I think, again, you slim him down a little bit, get that first step explosiveness back into his repertoire, he becomes that much more special. He's also a guy that I'm super biased to go from small school to big school, whether that's D2 up to D1 or FCS to FBS. I love guys to see that make that small school jump to big school jump and show that they can hang and handle that level of competition jump. And we've already seen that from Verse. So I like him a ton. So right now he's my edge 2, but I think Laiatu Latu might have jumped him. That being said, for the Chicago Bears, they need edge. I mean, they need edge bad. And I think Verse would not even close, really, by far and away be their most impactful edge rusher on the roster pretty much day one. All right, then we get to the New Orleans Saints. I'm going to go Keon Coleman here. Don't know what's going to happen with Michael Thomas. It's the tough part about doing this in October. We just don't know what free agency is going to bring. But let's just say Michael Thomas is gone. Keon Coleman's the way to bridge that gap. And he can do a little bit more than just work the underneath stuff, but he still kind of has that same frame to where it's like, hey, make this guy a red zone threat, throw him that slant to get in the end zone that we've seen Michael Thomas run and score on so many different times. He can still do that, but he gives you a little bit more of a deep threat as well. And also you saw the one-handed catch from 2 Saturdays ago. The man's he's just a freak athlete. So you add a little bit more dynamism to that offense. And then I'm looking at a wide receiver trio with, Chris Olave, Keon Coleman, Rashid Shaheed. I mean, those are 3 receivers that I really want to see a lot of big plays come out of. So I almost thought about Michael Penix isn't going to make it out of the first round, but could you draft Keon Coleman and then pair him up with Michael Penix to have these guys just run vertical routes and let Penix be that, deep ball, maestro to the offense? It's kind of an intriguing, proposition. Maybe I'll do it in a future mock, but for this one, I'm going to stick with Keon Coleman at 10. We'll address QB another time. Then we get to the Raiders. Speaking of quarterback, throwing J.J. McCarthy come off the board. I mean, the arm talent's live. I mean, you can't look at J.J. McCarthy and say, this guy has a dull arm, because then you're just lying to yourself. This man throws seeds. He's got enough mobility to it. I think the processing is there. It's just tough to tell, because even the game against Michigan State where it looks awesome, this isn't the Michigan State of 10 years ago that was, living in the top 25. There's not that same team or same program anymore. So we'll get a real test when he plays Penn State and when he plays Ohio State, and assuming they make the college football playoff, whoever they play there. I just don't think we've gotten to the real meat of his schedule yet. But what we've seen so far, I guess I want to see good quarterbacks beat up on lower competition, and that's what J.J. McCarthy's done. So he's checked that box. Now I just got to see him do it against higher level competition. But arm talent's live. Raiders, I said all offseason, what are the odds Jimmy Garoppolo plays 17 games? And he obviously already hasn't. Looks like he's going to play Monday night against the Lions. That's cool and all, but he's missing time. He's not the long-term answer. J.J. McCarthy might be. And I can see where McCarthy has some of those traits that McDaniel's looking for. Now we get to the Tennessee Titans. They move back to pick 12, and we get a new name into the video. And actually, I don't see him as an interior offensive lineman. It's just where Mock Draft Database has him logged. But Taliese Fuaga from Oregon State, and a guy that I started to hear some buzz about. Had to check him out, and while I was in Italy, I was actually really, really impressed with what I saw. 6'6", 330, and with a guy that size, my immediate questions are: how does he play with leverage? Do guys get underneath him? What's that anchor look like in turn? And then also, how explosive an athlete? Can he get out of his stance and be a greater in the run game? And simply put, Fuaga checks both those boxes. He is actually really nimble out of his stance, and because of that, in the run game, you're pairing power with speed, and really he's turning that quickness into more power, which he has plenty of as is, and because of that, he's just an absolute grater in the run game. And then when it comes to pass protection, despite being 6'6", he gets pretty low, and he has a nice solid anchor because of all that lower body strength. So to me, I think he's OT3. I think he's jumped Latham and Amarius Mims for me. I just have a few less question marks. He doesn't have the penalty issues that Latham has typically had. Only 3 penalties this year for Latham. We'll talk about him later on, but had 11 a year ago. I just see less concerns with Fuaga. Maybe he can't keep up with, an Olu or an Alt, who I think are super special, but I think Fuaga's just right there behind him, really damn solid. And for Tennessee, you're looking for an upgrade there at right tackle. That's Fuaga's true position. So plug and play. You keep Diller at the left side. Peter Skoronski's been great on the inside. Another year where you're addressing that offensive line, but I think it's an investment worth making for the Tennessee Titans as they go through this competitive rebuild. Then we get to the Indianapolis Colts. This is going to be another trade, and this is going to be an AFC trade. And anytime I did one of these, I was a little hesitant to try to make this move. So this is going to be the Indianapolis Colts once I find them, moving from pick 13. They're going to trade places with the Buffalo Bills. Now, when you're seeing this recording, the Bills offense just looked awesome on Thursday night. Mostly awesome, right? Diggs was a little quiet, but we got to see Gabe Davis make a big impact. Dalton Kincaid looked awesome. But, Gabe Davis last year of his contract, man. So I almost wonder, is Rome Odunze like not Gabe Davis who can do a little bit more? Kind of keep a similar frame. I think a guy who can win deep down the field, maybe a little less speed, but Odunze is way more polished as a route runner in the intermediate parts of the game. And I think it comes with more yak ability, too. That being said, Gabe Davis looked pretty good with the ball in his hand on Thursday night. So maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm not giving Davis enough credit. We'll see where the year goes. But I think if they end up moving on from Davis, Odunze is a potential guy who gives you everything you'd be losing with Gabe Davis, and maybe even adding a little bit more. And also, when you're paying your quarterback the amount of money they're paying Josh Allen, I'm looking at these high position value, right? Like, it's hard to get a receiver on the cheap. So if I can draft one in the first round and get one, I want that. Same thing with offensive tackle. We'll kind of talk about that later on in this video. Trying to find places where you can save a little bit against the cap and places where you're paying a lot of money to your quarterback. Specifically, it's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs, where we talk about that a little bit later on in the video. But Rome Odunze to the Bills, let me know if you're a Bills fan. Would you be fine with trading off, or essentially moving on from Gabe Davis and having Odunze be that second outside wide receiver? I'm kind of intrigued by that. Also, if you're a Bills fan, how about Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid? It was nice to see them make an impact on Thursday Night Football. Anyways, let's get off that and talk about the Washington Commanders at 14. I'm going to go with Dallas Turner here. Look, we're already hearing the rumors that, they're fielding calls about Montez Sweat, and maybe some offers have come in for Chase Young. And in reality, they paid Daron Payne last offseason, and that was the nail in the coffin for one of those two edge rushers to not be back in Washington. Furthermore, the real nail in the coffin was not picking up Chase Young's fifth-year option, which I was fine with at the time. But I think if you didn't pay Daron Payne and then decline the fifth-year option, you still give yourself the flexibility to sign both those guys. But because you signed Payne and you didn't franchise tag him, one of those two guys is gone. So I'm looking at a team that's looking for an edge rusher. Honestly, I think, Young's got the upside. He's the number 2 overall pick. I think that's who they'll hold on to, and they'll trade Montez Sweat. I might go the other way around. I don't know. I like both those players a lot. I'm a really big fan of Montez Sweat. I think he's a massively underrated player. But assuming one of those two guys are gone, let's draft Dallas Turner. A lot of guys have him as edge 1 because he's just a special, twitchy athlete. And guys like that don't often fall below, a point of being a good player at the NFL. Like, they're solid rotational pieces at the worst. So you're getting a relatively high floor for, someone in the first round because, there's also edge rushers who've been out of the league in like 3 or 4 years. So, I think with his athleticism, that gives him a decently high floor to at least be a solid contributor. But with the upside then to maybe be the best edge rusher in this year's class. And he's added a little bit of muscle. He's gained a little bit of weight. I talked about that in my preseason edge rankings video. And it given him a little bit more counter, right? He could always win with speed. He could get off that outside shoulder against a tackle and be able to dip underneath. But I need to see that inside move or the ability to win with power. And we're starting to see Turner add that power component to his game. So I think he's making adjustments. He's climbing up my edge rankings. Right now, I think probably edge 3. And because of that, I think, Washington, obviously going to be probably a new regime there at head coach, but I could see them wanting to keep a strength of strength, replace a Young or a Sweat with someone like a Dallas Turner falling into their lap at 14. Then we get to the Rams. The other guy who's fallen in this is Kool-Aid McKinstry. He had a little bit of a lull when it comes to these corners. You have DeJean go in the top 10, but then nothing else after. So want to get a corner off the board. And I talked about this in my power rankings. Man, I didn't think the Steelers were as good of a matchup against the Rams as they were, but ultimately Pittsburgh pass rush. Okay, maybe we did see that coming. But also, the Rams corners just aren't it. Darian Kendrick, Ahkello Witherspoon, they're just not cutting it. Kobe Durant, I guess, is okay, but I want Durant as my CB3, not my CB, 1 or 2. So they need a massive upgrade there. I got Kool-Aid McKinstry right now still as my top corner, him or DeJean, depending on what you classify DeJean as. But as an outside corner, I got Kool-Aid at number 1. Long arms, got a knack for getting his hands on footballs, and also a nice impact player on special teams too. So the Rams who desperately need an upgrade there in the in the secondary, I think this is the guy. If he falls in your lap, you pull the trigger there. And then in the second round, we'll address that defensive line because I want to add one more player to that front 7 to really unlock that pass rush. Next, the Arizona Cardinals, where I'm going to have my top edge rusher come off the board. For whatever reason, Mock Draft Database has him as a linebacker. I assure you he's an edge. He's going to be one of 2 UCLA edge rushers we have come off the board here. Laiatu Latu, I said a little bit earlier, there's just no work that really needs to be done. And that's a little hyperbolic because there's always work that can be done. You can always get better, all that coach speak stuff. But, just a full arsenal of moves and honestly, good enough athleticism to hang at the next level. Not special, not saying he's going to be a combine warrior, but he checks all the boxes and has plenty of athleticism to win off that, in itself. And he's just a master of not letting offensive linemen get their hands on him. And because of that, his hand fighting, that's what makes him, like, to me, the best edge rusher, and where I'm like, what work needs to be done? Like, this guy can get to the NFL level and be relatively productive right away. So love this for the Cardinals. Add him into a rotation with Cam Thomas and the Gardeck, the Barbarian, Dennis Gardeck. And I'm feeling a little bit better about that pass rush, and we'll be able to address some of their other positions they need on the defensive side later on. Then we get the Jets at 17. This is going to be an offensive line pick. I'll go J.C. Latham. Only 3 penalties this year versus the 11 last year, but still monitoring that throughout the course of the season. But other than penalty issues, this guy's rock solid, man. Like, he's awesome in pass protection, high-end athlete at a great frame, 6'5", like 325. And also great in the run game. Like, there's really not many flaws I have against Latham in his game. It's just those penalties that were kind of killer when I look back at his 2022-2023 season. So as long as he continues to stay clean in that category, yeah, to me, I feel pretty comfortable with him being a first rounder. Jets could obviously use one. Here, we're having Latham play and plug in at right tackle. Mekhi Becton's going to be the left tackle of the future, hopefully, fingers crossed. And then hopefully this means the Jets' offensive line situation is a little bit more fixed. Now, I've also heard that Elijah Vera-Tucker is going to probably stick at right tackle, so maybe that throws a wrench in these plans. But I don't love the interior offensive line value right here, right now, so I went with Latham instead at 17. Next, the Bengals, I'm actually staying off the tackle. That's when I have Amarius Mims come off the board. And ultimately, I think this is a good tackle class. I think we could easily see we've had, 5 offensive linemen already off the board here in the first round, the first 18 picks. I think that could be true. There's a lot of upside. I like the top 2 as elite guys. I like Fuaga's a pretty high floor, plug and play, solid player. And these next 2 come with a lot of upside. Latham has a lot of tape to be impressed by, just needs to stay clean. Then Amarius Mims, all the same stuff that people fell in love with for Broderick Jones over. Amarius Mims got it. Size, speed, strength. I mean, that trio, that triangle, man's off the charts. Huge frame, great play strength, and a very nimble athlete at that. So, really intriguing prospect. And Jonah Williams is not going to be back playing right tackle next year. So, Amarius Mims has been playing right tackle for Georgia. To me, this is like a plug-and-play option. You just hope that, he's a little bit more polished than most one-year college starters are. And right now, we see the Steelers not playing Broderick Jones. I think he's a little bit better than Dan Moore, but I feel it's because they fear that he's just not fully polished yet. And that could be the same issue for Amarius Mims. So time will tell. We'll see how he plays throughout the rest of the season. But if he lives up to what I think he can be, plug-and-play option here for the Bengals at right tackle. Then we get to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this is where we're going to have another trade. So I'm going to have Tampa Bay moving back just a handful of spots and have the Baltimore Ravens coming up. It's actually going to be a 9-spot flip, and we're just going to give up a third-rounder. Hey, maybe one of these fifths, whatever. Again, just make the trade go through. And on the Baltimore Ravens here, take John Newton. He fell a little bit. He's a player that I like a lot. He's going to probably end up being top 10 to 15 on my big board. More so as a high floor guy versus a high upside guy. But that being said, I'm looking at the Ravens and their interior defensive line. Travis Jones should be that nose tackle of the future, but like those other 3 tacks, I think they can get better. And Newton, already a great run defender. Don't think there's any work that needs to be done there. I think that translates to the NFL level. And he's so quick out of his stance that he's getting into offensive linemen before they're ready. And because of that, his quicks make him a really nice pass rusher too. It's kind of the same stuff we talked about with Kalijah Kancey. Newton's just got a little bit more mass and can win with more power than Kancey did. So, love this as an immediate plug-and-play option. We've seen the Ravens, Odafe Owe coming off injury. He's looked pretty good with what we've gotten to see so far. And then they just made it work with Clowney and some of these other veterans. So I thought about going edge here. Maybe like a Chop Robinson, but drafting another Penn State edge, feels a little, it feels like you're kind of going back to the Odafe Owe But this is another way to try to get that pass rush that they're maybe looking for, while also shoring up that run defense with a really solid player with Johnny Newton. All right, then the Atlanta Falcons here at 20. I'm going to go Michael Penix. I think at this point, Michael Penix is my QB2, man. I watch him throw a deep ball, and my jaw's on the floor. I mean, his ball placement deep down the field is just beautiful, like a textbook. And it's crazy to see how this guy went from this high-end athlete that you're working on as a passer in Indiana. A couple injuries later, he becomes this really nice passer, especially deep down the field as a vertical guy who, the athleticism is, maybe it's fine, but you also don't really want him running just given his medical history. And really, I'm just looking at this Atlanta, and maybe it's not the perfect fit because you probably want a quarterback you can tap into as a runner. It's what Arthur Smith did in Tennessee a little bit with Tannehill. It's what he liked to do with Ritter and Mariota. But, Penix, I think, could be a good enough athlete to do some of that stuff, but he'll obviously have to play it safe. But really, I'm looking at a team that's going to have a lot of running success, whether it's Algier, Bijan, Cordero Patterson. Arthur Smith draws it up well in that offensive line right now. Ultimately, maybe not as good as last year, but they're still blocking it up pretty well. So I want a guy who, while everyone's creeping closer to the line of scrimmage to respect that run game, I want someone who has the deep ball accuracy to beat him over the top. I want to get Kyle Pitts involved as a deep threat. I want Drake London getting more involved in the intermediate. To me, that's Michael Penix. The downside of his game is like his accuracy on throws 0 to 15 yards. It leaves some to be desired versus like 15 plus yards down the field. This man feels like he's automatic. And it's almost similar to what we talked about with the prospect earlier on, like with Caleb Williams. It's like, if you can do the special stuff, I feel like I can teach you to do the easier stuff. And that's kind of where I feel like I'm at with Penix right now. Like, you can hit that, 50-yard bomb and catch a receiver in stride. I'll teach you how to throw that 6-yard hitch consistently with accuracy. Like, I feel like that's the easier side to be able to teach up. So I'm hoping that's the case here with Atlanta. And plus, I just don't think Ritter's it long term. Next, we get to the Indianapolis Colts. Another guy to get into the first round for the first time, Xavier Legette. He's gone 8 of 12 on contested catch opportunities this year. He's 6'3", 227. I just think he's a better Alec Pierce, to be honest with you. He may not have the vertical that Pierce does, but I also think that he might not be far off. Like, Pierce had like a 42-inch vertical, 43-inch vertical, if memory serves. But I'm just looking at a guy who could be that ultimate physical and also yards after the catch weapon too. But you look at Downs in the slot, Michael Pittman is the possession type. I think this is the physical type that also can win in contested catch spots that you're looking to add. And we'll see where he goes deep down deep throughout the rest of the season. And I want to see him be used as a deep threat as often as I can, just to see if, maybe he is that Alec Pierce replacement through and through. But ultimately, I think they could do better than Pierce. They moved back, and they still get the draft for a wide receiver. Feels like a nice win there for Indy. Next is the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm going to go back to the receiver well. I'm going to go A.D. Mitchell. I went with Xavier Worthy a couple weeks back for Dallas, but now I just want to go with A.D. Mitchell just to go with the other Texas, wide receiver. But he also snapped a Houston, DB's ankles the other week with a great sharp route run. And dude, 6'4" and flies just as much as Worthy does, and then you add that type of route running prowess. Shoo. I mean, that's a special play right there. And ultimately, Brandon Cooks hasn't totally worked out, so I wonder if A.D. Mitchell could just be that speed threat moving forward, while also adding a little bit more size to this wide receiver room that I think right now they don't need it, maybe need it per se, but wouldn't be bad to have, right? Next, Pittsburgh Steelers, we're going to go to the cornerback position. This is going to be Nate Wiggins, who's played really well this year at Clemson. 6'2", 185 pounds. Man's got man press upside written all over him. Don't know if Pittsburgh would totally use him that way. I think he's a high enough athlete to where if it's a zone-heavy scheme, he's just fine. And you add in those long arms, he's been able to get into receiver pockets more often than not. So I just like the idea of pairing him up with Joey Porter Jr. You have your corner tandem of the future because, it's not Levi Wallace and Pat Peterson. Then we're actually going to go back to the secondary once we get to the second round. I'm going to overhaul that back end because Pittsburgh cut the pass rush, and if you take that secondary and just raise it up to an above average status, talk about one of the best defenses in football. I mean, they're already one of the best defenses in football, but I think if you shore up that secondary, that's when it becomes a really special unit. I think Wiggins is a good step in the right direction. Next, Houston. I feel like I'm always giving them Leonard Taylor. I don't know why Leonard Taylor's not coming off the board beforehand, but I always just see the Texans and I'm like, oh, dude, give him an interior defensive lineman. Really take a hold of that front four and kind of shape it in the mold of what D'Amico Ryans had in San Francisco. Now we're talking. And Leonard Taylor, freaky athlete, insane, kind of measurables from, height, weight, and arm length standpoint. And he wins off of that stuff. So I almost wonder, could he be this, Eric Armstead? Could he be a DeForest Buckner type for the middle of that defensive line in Houston? Pair him up with Will Anderson, who will be going into year 2 in 2024. Like, all of a sudden, the defensive line's looking pretty stout. Partner that up with how well they got Henry To'o playing and, the upside that still is there with Derek Stingley Jr. and Jalen Petre's all over the field. And ultimately, D'Amico Ryans just has that unit playing really, really hard right now. So I think adding a, upside player like Leonard Taylor, who maybe has the highest ceiling of any of the interior defensive linemen in this class, it's a really intriguing prospect, and I trust D'Amico Ryans to coach him up and get him close to that high-end play. So I like Taylor a lot. He just wins with raw ability and frame, more so than like Johnny Newton, who wins with polish and technique. Taylor's just not there yet, but again, I trust D'Amico Ryans to get him there. Then we get to Seattle at pick 25. I kind of struggle with this pick. I'm going to go with Graham Barton. I think Seattle could just use an upgrade at either guard spot. And to me, Barton is more of a guard than a tackle just because of the arm length. It's just kind of the Peter Skoronski situation all over again. And I also see Mel Kiper Jr. listing him at center. So, maybe he'll play center at the next level. Again, I'm thinking he's a guard. So I think it's just a plug-and-play upgrade there at left guard. The strength to be able to anchor, the movement skills to be able to fit in that zone blocking scheme. To me, he's just a perfect fit and gives you a big-time upgrade there on the inside of that offensive line, which desperately could use it. And think about what this means for K-Walk and, Zach Charbonnet. I think this makes their lives a whole lot easier. Then we get to San Francisco 49ers at 26. I'm going to go to the cornerback spot. And I'm actually going to go with the guy, I do like Kalen King. I know this is going to be a spot. Denzel Burke, when he's played, has been pretty good this year. But look, TJ Tampa's one of the highest graded coverage players in, PFF's grading system this year. And it comes with, ideal size, good enough athlete, and actually multiple years of high-end grading. So just love his fluidity and comfort within zone. And I think that really fits with what San Francisco is doing. But I also think if push comes to shove, he's got the length and the size and the strength to be able to go and get a receiver at the line of scrimmage. So I see some scheme versatility there. And ultimately, he's put together 2 back-to-back really solid seasons for the Cyclones. So I'm looking at him as a first-rounder. And, this year, TJ Tampa's played better than Kalen King. Kalen King may be more twitchy, but size, advantage goes to Tampa. This year's tape, advantage goes to Tampa. So I'm going to go with him, San Francisco 49ers, pair him up with Charvarius Ward, and kind of like Pittsburgh, man. That pass rush can be crazy. If you get a really nice back end, that's when it becomes a really, really special, like all-time type of unit. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars at 27. This is where I'm going to have Gabriel Murphy come off the board. And it's just one of those guys where it's like, you look at his PFF grades, and he's had 3 straight seasons of elite pass rush grades. In 2 of those 3 years, 90 plus. That's ridiculous. 6'3", 260, so he's got that ideal frame. And I'm looking at the Jags, and ultimately Trayvon Walker hasn't taken that step forward yet. He can also play on the inside. And ultimately, the NFL, you want 3 edge rushers. It's not a 2-player position. It's 3. You need that extra edge rotational guy. And honestly, I'd argue as far as that it's a 4-player rotation, really. And I want 4 guys that I really like. So at least getting a third here with Gabriel Murphy, who has great PFF grades. The production of follow suit. He's already got 4 sacks this season, had 80 a year ago, and plenty more pressures to go with it. I think just pairing him up with Josh Allen, so it's not just the Josh Allen show every week, and then trying to figure out Trayvon Walker. Is he inside? Is he just the 3rd guy in the mix? Cool. Murphy buys you time to figure that out. And ultimately, if Walker hits the ceiling, you have a really nasty trio there and the edge. Then we get to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after they traded down. They go with Barrett Carter. They're not going to trade Devin White, but he did ask for a trade. And Lavonte David's on a 1-year deal. I think linebacker's a position where they could look to replace one of those 2 guys, if not find one of the 2 starters they're looking for during the NFL draft, because both those guys could be gone by next season, right? So you might get one in free agency, one in the draft. And Barrett Carter, man, just love the athletic upside this guy has. Just fires downhill, could be great as a blitzer, and almost could just be a continuation of what they had with Devin White, but also really stout in coverage, true sideline to sideline ability. I wish he had a little bit more of the anticipatory skills that Jeremiah Trotter Jr. has, but beggars can't be choosers. He's got everything else, so give and take. Give me the freaky athlete, and let's give him to the Buccaneers. But that being said, if you're moving on from Lavonte David, I could also see where they're like, no, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., that's how we replace Lavonte David. We get another cerebral player like that. So just for transparency, I did consider that selection as well. Then we get to the Detroit Lions, and this is where I have Kalen King come off the board. Look, Emmanuel Mosley obviously out for the year, and next year, I think we all kind of knew that Detroit was still going to be looking at the secondary because it was a 1-year deal for C.J. Gardner-Johnson, 1-year deal for Mosley. You still have Sutton there on a 3-year deal, so that's good. But there's still at least one starting spot there at the cornerback spot where you're looking to add. And I don't know if Kalen King's going to play slot or he'll play outside. That's my only worry about this, because to me, Brian Branch is already a top 3 slot player in the NFL right now. So King is going to have to play on the outside. Do you feel like 5'10", 180-ish is big enough to do that? Maybe there's your concern, but they've also been playing more zone this year, so I'm a little less concerned with it versus 2 years ago and last year where Aaron Glenn wanted to play man coverage pretty much all the time. So I feel like the scheme's adjusting a little bit. It makes it a little bit easier to squeeze Kalen King in there. And look, he's still ultimately a twitchy athlete. I think he'll be a combine warrior. This year, the play is taking a little bit of a step down, a coverage grade of 57 using PFF's numbers, when last year was in the mid-80s. So a little frustrating there, but also plenty of season left. And if he has a couple of big games against some big-time schools, then that grade could repair itself pretty quickly. Or at least there's going to be the upside tape that we can look to and be like, hey, this may have been a disappointing season, but look what he did against X receiver, and still kind of have him in a spot where he has a lot of draft fans. Because I still like him. I really like the athlete. Love the start and stop, the twitchy kind of change of direction skills. This year's tape just hasn't been as impressive. Next is Miami at pick 30. We go Ja'Tavion Sanders. I think both Sanders and Bowers, obviously Bowers, should go in the first round. But Sanders, really nice athlete and a really solid blocker for Texas too. So I actually think he's a good scheme fit for what Mike McDaniel wants. And you're not going to draft George Kittle, but Sanders kind of has that same skill set I think you're looking for compared to a Mike Gesicki who just didn't fit with what McDaniel wanted. So love getting Sanders here in the first round. Really love his upside. And to me, he's still tight end too, given his athletic ability. So love the fit there in Miami, and just makes that offense that much harder to deal with. Good Lord, the Dolphins need that, right? All right. 2 more picks to make here in the first round. We actually have back-to-back trades. So I'm going to have the Kansas City Chiefs moving back from pick 31 and coming up to take an edge rusher here is going to be the New Orleans Saints. So just had to find the two teams. Not going to be too expensive. We'll just throw in the second, 5th round pick. Maybe it's the first one. They also have a handful of 6s, so boom, there you go. And ultimately, I'm going to have New Orleans come up and draft an edge rusher. This is where I have Chop Robinson coming off the board. He fell a little bit. This season, he's been solid. I think we've seen a little bit more of the limitations that come with when you're the team's only high-end edge rusher. What happens? Well, you get a ton of attention on you. And that's what's happened with Chop Robinson this year at Penn State. So still like the prospects, still love the upside from an athletic standpoint. I think he also plays like a really yoked up 250. Like he sets the edge and plays the run really strong. And I think you put him in New Orleans. We'll see how much longer Cam Jordan's around. But yeah, Grant Anderson playing out of his mind, Isaiah Foskey, Peyton Turner. Again, I want a 4-man rotation. And to me, those 4, that could be it moving forward for the New Orleans Saints. So love them being aggressive here, and that's kind of the Mickey Loomis, MO. Trade up, go get a guy. I think Chop Robinson's the type of athlete that he could covet as well, especially if he falls all the way down to 31. All right, one more trade to round out the first round of this mock draft, and I'm going to have the Philadelphia Eagles moving back and trading places with Green Bay. This is another one of those in-conference trades. I'm not entirely sure if it happened, but let's just say that this situation it does. A 4, a 5 for moving up 9 spots feels pretty generous. And Green Bay will draft Cam Kinchens. And Kinchens is another one of these guys that I've had fall when, to me, he's a complete safety. And honestly, the more I watch of him, the more I think about, is he a blue chipper? Like, I don't see anything in his game that's like, you need to get better there. You need to add that. Like, he's great at covering out of the slot. He's awesome as an over-top weapon. He's a great tackler, great run defense. I just don't see a whole lot of this game that's like, you need to refine that. You got to get better there. I need to see more out of you there. I think he's well polished. It's just kind of hard to find a home for a safety, especially one that's not like 6'3" like Cooper DeJean. And Cooper DeJean also is playing outside corner right now for Iowa, so it's just a little different there. But I wanted to get him in the first round, and the Packers definitely could use the safety long term. Who knows if Darnell Savage is going to be back? But also Savage is just a different safety type than Cam Kinchens. Cool. We get into the second round. I'm going to have to pick it up here. This video is going a little longer than I initially anticipated, but you've been around the channel, you know I have a habit to do that. Emeka Egbuka goes to Carolina. Look, they need wide receiver talent. I think everyone's saying it. Everyone sees it. Thiel's an awesome fantasy story, but is he the long-term guy? No. And is he ultimately as good in real life as he is in fantasy? I would argue no. And Egbuka could be that sharp route runner they need to separate on the outside. Also think that's a team that could pay big money to T. Higgins or someone like that if they become available this free agency. So if they do that, Egbuka, Mike Evans, and Adam Thielen, okay, now we're talking. All right, then we get to the Arizona Cardinals. This is where I'm going to have Josh Newton come off the board. Newton's just graded out. Another one of these guys who's played another really strong season. He was really good a year ago at TCU. You could argue he was the better corner between him and Trey Hodges Tomlinson. And this year, he's just kind of backing it up and has more prototypical NFL size, right around 6'1", 185 pounds, and he's just doubled down on what he did last year. So love that addition there to Arizona. We added edge. Now we get a corner in the mix. Feels like we're repairing that defense little by little. Now we get Kansas City after moving down. I'm going to give him Chris Jenkins. Would be totally fine with Chris Jenkins going in the first round. Not much in the way of a pass rusher. He's just kind of serviceable there, but he's an elite run defender, and he's one of the highest graded run defenders in college football right now. And I think you pair that up with Chris Jones, who, plays on the inside, but they also move him out to the edge every so often. I just think this gives you more flexibility with how you deploy Chris Jones, but also, Chris Jones can then focus solely on being a pass rusher, and it extends the longevity of his career a little bit if he's not having to be as focused on being an elite run defender because you got Chris Jenkins alongside him. Next up is the New York Giants, and I'm actually going to give a shout out here to Alex from Hail Mary Sports. We did a mock draft earlier this season, and one of the guys that he talked about that I hadn't heard anybody else mention was Tyler Guyton, and I'm a big fan of it. Now that I'm getting around to check him out, kind of like Talise Fuaga, who I also know Alex loves a lot. Big body guy, but quick out of his stance and an absolute grater in the run game. And he's held up in pass protection. I don't think he's Anton Harrison good, but he's held up. He hasn't been a liability there. So love that addition there for the Giants. And Guyton's already playing right tackle, so I just say plug and play. You keep him in that spot, and you move Evan Neal inside to play guard. And Neal did play left guard for a year at Alabama. And ultimately, left guard's been a problem spot for the Giants. So this might solve 2 problems at once for the G-men. Then we get to the New England Patriots, and as promised, I'm going to have them take quarterback. It's going to be Quinn Ewers. He's shown up in the big moments, and I still think the upside is there for sure. Just sometimes the consistency wavers. But I'm looking at a guy with good enough size, got the mobility, big arm to hit those deep throws. I just think part of it, it felt like he's kind of had his rhythm thrown off, every year basically because of an injury. So hopefully he stays healthy throughout the rest of this season. We don't have that kind of blip in the radar where it feels like it throws him off and kind of puts him into a funk like he did at the end of last year. But ultimately this year, I think the Alabama game and then enough good games around it have him in this, late first round, early second round, interesting developmental quarterback status. I'm still a fan of his, obviously a highly touted recruit as well. And ultimately, I just don't think the Patriots can stick with Mac Jones for any longer. So let's go ahead and see what the upside of Ewers is all about in New England. All right, pick 38, I'm going to give the Chicago Bears Brandon Dorlus, who I believe they have, yes, as a defensive lineman. He's a guy at Oregon who started on the inside, has moved outside to play edge, and has really developed nicely as a passer. Already 4 sacks this season, and really the hand usage is there. Not the quickest of guys, but the hand usage makes up for it. And with his background being an inside, interior defensive lineman, he's a really stout run defender. He plays the run really, really strong, especially against tackles. So, the only downside of this is he's going to play inside or outside of that 4-man, 4-3 base defense for Eberflus. Let's just say he plays inside, and you throw him in a rotation with Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens, and we'll see who the best guys are. But I could also see a world where, hey, Chicago needs 2 edge rushers. So if Dorlus is playing on one edge and Jared Verse is playing the other, I think that's just an upgrade to that defense as a whole. Then we get back to the Chargers at 39. This is where I'm going to have Mason Smith come off the board, so a little bit of an interior defensive lineman run. Smith's been pretty good this year, nothing special, but solid. And, former 5-star recruit, one of the top recruits of his class, and he's going to be a combine warrior, simply put. So I think good enough play paired with what we think he is as an athlete and the recruiting background and the fact he's finally healthy. That's going to be another narrative you hear is, well, this was the first year he was fully healthy and playing on the inside. The upside's still there. He's still got a trajectory swinging on the upswing. You're going to hear all that throughout draft season. So the Chargers desperately need to get better on the inside, specifically against the run. And I like the strength plus the athleticism that Smith provides. Maybe he could be that plug in the middle of the Chargers defense. Then the Titans at pick 40. Obviously the Kevin Byard trade kind of fresh in my mind. So decided to go Tyler Nubin here. Wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the first round. Like a team that's looking for a playmaker on the back end, just read QB's eyes and make plays. That's Tyler Nubin. He actually has the lowest passer rating against in college football of any Power 5 player, and which is crazy because he's doing it at safety too. So freaky sideline to sideline ability. And I didn't have a safety rankings just because those videos don't do all that well on the channel. Sorry, sometimes analytics rule out, the metrics went out. But he would have been my number 2 safety right behind Cam Kinchens. I just love his free safety ability. And he's also pretty solid against the run. It's not like he's one of these guys like maybe an Andre Cisco from a couple years ago where it's awesome on the back end, but sometimes the angles that he takes to a ball carrier are a little iffy. Sometimes the tackling can be a little rough, like a Kalen Bullock in this class. I think Bullock's done better. We'll talk about him a little bit later on as well. But Nubin to me is as close to a full, complete package of a prospect at free safety. True, over-the-top ball hawk free safety as there is in this class. So love that. And, of course, replacing Kevin Byard's never easy, but maybe Tyler Nubin is the guy to be able to do it. Then we get to Philadelphia at pick 41. Look, I think we're starting to see the age in that secondary. Slay and Bradbury haven't looked as good, and also Bradbury's moved inside to play the slot, which I think is a good move. Again, going back to what I think the future of the position entails and how important it's going to be. But then that leaves Josh Jobe on the outside, who hasn't been good. So let's just add Denzel Burke in the mix. He's missed some time this year, but when he's been on the field, he's been locked down. So also prototypical athleticism, ideal size, like 6 foot 190. So I think he checks all the boxes. He just needs to be healthy. This has kind of been the breakout season he's had so far on the field. So hopefully, returning from injury, he continues to play at a super high level, can stay in this top 50 range. Partner him up with aging Slay and Bradbury, but still pretty solid Slay and Bradbury. That secondary is looking awesome in Philadelphia. Then at pick 42, the Raiders are going to also stay in the secondary. Kamari Lassiter, a lot of the same stuff I talked about with Burke there. High in athleticism, ideal frame right around 6'1", 190, 195. And he's played really well this year for Georgia. And I don't think this Georgia defense is as good as it was the last 2 seasons, but it's still pretty good. But because of that, Lassiter's had a little bit more asked of him, and he's been tested more than, the Georgia teams that had Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, and Nakobe Dean, and Nolan Smith, had all these guys just lined up one after another. So he's had a little bit harder there, but he's played really, really well this year. And the Raiders desperately need an upgrade there at outside corner. I think Lassiter here at 42 is a really solid value to fill that. Then at 43, I mentioned earlier, Minnesota needs some work to be done on the interior offensive line. And Mock Draft Database actually has him as a tackle. But to me, Zach Zinter is probably the top guard in this class. He's just been awesome this year at Michigan. And it's the combination of strength plus movement skills I think makes him fit in that zone blocking scheme for Kevin O'Connell. And look, they're signing Dalton Reisner off the street when he's been available for 6 months now, hoping that it's an upgrade. But look, the guy's been available for 6 months for a reason. So if you're that desperate to sign a Dalton Reisner, you're looking for an upgrade there, and I think Zach Zinter definitely gives you that if you're Minnesota. All right, then we get to the Indianapolis Colts. Still think they can get a little bit better at edge, so JT Tuamelo. And basically Tuamelo, I just think, especially if you tell him it's fourth quarter against Penn State, this guy turns it into another gear, but he's just worth taking another swing of the bat at if you're the Colts. And, Kwity Paye's pretty good run defender, hasn't really turned a corner there as an edge rusher. Actually, the guy with the highest pass rush grade at their edge group is Dayo Odeyingbo, second rounder the same year they took Kwity Paye. So maybe it's a rotation of Paye, of Odeyingbo, and Tuamelo. Whatever it is, I think it's a position where they can still get better. And here in the second round, the value kind of lined up with JT to where it's worth the extra swing of the bat. So I like that selection a good bit there for Indianapolis. Then we get to Washington, who went edge of the first round. Here I'm going to give him Kingsley Suamataia, former 4-star recruit, and to me one of the best pass protecting offensive tackles this year's class. Awesome size to go with it. Enough movement skills too to be solid enough in the run game. But really you feel his footwork in the pass protection side of it because he's great mirroring opposing edge rushers. Yes, he's at BYU. He's not doing the SEC, but I still think BYU's level of competition is stout enough to where I'm not too worried about that. And I think Hal's been more the product of the cause for pressure against him than the offensive line. But that being said, the offensive line's not great, especially considering Charles Leno's like 32, 33. So they're looking for a long-term answer, and I love the value of Suamataia there in the second round. Then at pick 46, let's give the Los Angeles Rams a little bit of a project player here, but let's go with Jack Sawyer. Edge and corner stand out to me as like the two spots where I want to see the Rams get better. And we're seeing Byron Young have a lot of success, not because he's super polished as an edge rusher, like he's got the moveset down. He's just an awesome athlete, and Aaron Donald commands so much attention that Byron Young can win one-on-ones. I think Jack Sawyer could do the exact same thing. Former 5-star recruit. He's played a little bit of QB spot, off-ball linebacker, but he's also played edge this year. And he's got 3 sacks over the last 2 weeks. So for a guy that I described in my way too early edge rankings as raw, still kind of coming into his own, maybe he's turning a corner now. Still got the rest of the season to figure it out, but I feel like Jack Sawyer may now be kind of finding his rhythm here. And at the worst, he's another freaky athlete to get one-on-ones against because Aaron Donald could command so much attention. So Byron Young on one side, Jack Sawyer on another. Those are 2 freaky edge rushers with uber athleticism that can just win one-on-ones. And then, Aaron Donald obviously commands a lot of the attention there in the middle. You add a corner, all of a sudden this Rams defense is getting closer to where it was when they won a Super Bowl. Then we get back to the Eagles at 43. I'm going to go with Cooper Beebe here. To me, I see him more as a guard than a tackle, and I think he's got the movement skills to fit with the scheme that the Eagles run, but also plenty of play strength. And really, I don't know, I'm kind of trying to buy some Lane Johnson insurance here. Again, I see Beebe more as a guard, but in a pinch where Lane Johnson goes down, I feel a little bit better about BB stepping in to play right tackle than Jack Driscoll. You can also just go straight up tackle here. Like if you wanted a Blake Fisher, Patrick Paul, Jordan Morgan, I'm fine with that here. But also I could see them trying to find one more upgrade there on the inside. So I'll go with Cooper Beebe. Kind of has this swing, guard, and tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. And also I just like him a little bit more than some of the other interior offensive linemen available right now. And, Jordan Morgan, that would require flip to the right side. Patrick Paul, same thing. Blake Fisher hasn't been as good as I was hoping for Notre Dame this year, but he does play right tackle, so maybe that's an option. Another guy to consider, kind of like Cooper Beebe. Beebe now plays on the inside, but Troy Fontenot from Washington plays left tackle for the Huskies. I just think with his arm length, he's going to play guard, but maybe he's another guy who could fill in and be that Lane Johnson, kind of contingency option. Then we get to Green Bay here at 48, and I'm actually going to go to defensive line and T'Vondre Sweat. So talked about Chris Jenkins earlier as one of the highest graded run defenders in college football. T'Vondre Sweat's actually at number 1 using PFF's data there. So just a mean 2-gapping defensive tackle right there in the middle. I think would go a long way. They've already moved Kenny Clark to kind of playing more 3-tack just because he's not as good against the run as he once was. I think T'Vondre Sweat, kind of like we talked about with Chris Jenkins and Chris Jones, it's like if you just let Sweat be the guy who plugs the middle, focus on the run, it prolongs Kenny Clark's career a little bit more because he's just focused on pinning his ears back and getting to the quarterback. So I like that addition there, and it just gives one more guy. And also Devontae Wyatt, more of a 3-tech than a nose tackle. So I know they've gone defensive line just relatively recent in the first round, but this is a different type of defensive lineman. Then we get to the Cincinnati Bengals, and at 49, I'm going to give him Chris Abrams-Drain. Really intriguing prospect. A little undersized, 5'11", a little under 180, but a guy who started his career on the inside playing slot, then moved outside. But either way you spin it for Cincinnati, it's the last year of the deal for Chidobe Awuzie. It's the last year of the deal for Mike Hilton. And neither one of them are really playing all that great this year. So whether he plays slot, which I'd be totally fine with, again, come back next week when I talk about my slot, theory kind of going out there next week, hopefully next week. He'd be a great addition there and a Mike Hilton replacement. Or maybe he just, you deal with the size limitations and he plays on the outside. And I'm thinking more he'll play slot because it'd be really tough to live with an outside corner tandem of, DJ Turner, who's like 5'10", 5'11", 180 pounds, and then Chris Abrams-Draine, who's sub 180 and 5'11". That might be a little too much. But here in the second round, to have this guy who's been an elite coverage player on both the inside and outside at Missouri in the SEC be your future slot corner, I love that value. And of course, it's a position I think it's warranted of the value here at 49. Then we get to the Houston Texans. We're going to go back to the edge group, and I'm going to go with Braylon Trice. So we're really focusing on the defensive line. Ultimately, I just didn't really love the value of what else was available either. So adding a kind of speed to power guy, I'm not super high on Trice, but I know he's got some fans out there. To me, he only wins with speed to power, and that's that and a good like spin move are like the two things that when you see it, you immediately kind of get an emotional reaction to. Like speed to power, you just bulldoze through a tackle. Okay, cool, that's fun to watch. Wow, that I immediately, kind of noticed that. And then a spin move, it's like, whoa, what a freaky athlete, what a tight spin. Like, that's awesome, and it immediately catches your eye. So I feel like we notice that more than it actually should, maybe, just because you remember it more. But that's really the only thing Trice has to win consistently with. But again, I trust DeMeco Ryans to coach him up. And honestly, his speed to power as a compliment to Will Anderson might be good enough. That might be all they need, really. And that might be just the perfect pairing. And then you have Leonard Taylor again on the inside. Really love transforming that defensive line and trying to get DeMeco Ryans that front four that he had in San Francisco. Next up, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and let's go interior offensive line. And I've had another theory about this. This probably wouldn't do a whole lot of views or anything, but center's kind of the most underrated offensive line position in my books. I think if you have an elite guard, it's worth the same value as an elite tackle, so maybe that's underrated. But like I think about when Travis Frederick missed a year with the Dallas Cowboys, and they went from year over year best offensive line in football, the best. Frederick misses a year, they go down to good. Frederick comes back and they're the best offensive line in football ever again. And we've kind of seen the same impact for the Buccaneers and Ryan Jensen, right? Like he misses time and they go from a great unit to, whoa, what the hell's going on here in Tampa Bay? We got to fix this. So I think Cedric Van Pran, who's only been better this year at Georgia, gives you a big time, Ryan Jensen replacement, an upgrade there at center over Robert Hainsey, who ultimately might be better at guard anyways. He was a tackle at Notre Dame, like his movement skills, and I think he could maybe be that left guard of the future over Matt Filer. But right now it's kind of a young interior offensive line. They're still feeling out a lot of growing pains with Hainsey and Cody Mock, and then Filer's kind of the older guy. But I think adding in Van Pran, solid, consistent, multi-year starter, multiple national championships under his belt. You move Hainsey to left guard, you keep Mock there at right guard, hope he takes a year or two leap. All of a sudden that interior is looking a whole lot better in my eyes. Then the Buffalo Bills, this is where we're going to talk about Kalen Bullock. He's really cleaned up his tackling. That's like the number one thing I was concerned about going into this year. He is an awesome playmaker over the top. He is a true ball hawking free safety. It's just anytime the run game comes his way or receiver comes his way, more often than not, it feels like he's missing the tackle. But he's really cleaned it up a ton this year. It's not great against the run, but if it's not for a lack of he can't tackle. Now it's just kind of coaching him up on angles and how to put himself in the right position to be a more effective tackler. But we're seeing strides in the right direction, right? Like he's a more willing tackler this year than he was last year, and he's gotten better at it, while also still having freak over-the-top playmaking, true free safety skill set that's hard to combine. So here for the Bills, obviously Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, they can't play forever, so I really like the value of a true over-the-top ball hawk, playmaking safety type like Bullock here at 52. Then we get to the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm going to go with the corner from Alabama, Terrion Arnold. Not a guy that was on my preseason corner rankings, but kind of was on my radar. 6 foot, 190, 195 pounds, just kind of your prototypical size, pretty good athlete. And he's played pretty well this year for Alabama. Not wow, not like insane, not Kool-Aid McKinstry, but he's been really solid on the other side. Now, part of that makes me worry, hey, Kool-Aid's probably getting the harder assignments, so is that making Arnold's job a little easier? Maybe, maybe not. But I also think once we get the combine, we'll get a good show. If he turns into a workout warrior, he's probably going to go around this range. If not, probably late second, early third. But he's a guy I haven't talked about. He's played pretty well this year for Alabama, so I wanted to give him a shout. I think Atlanta could use another number two, corner because ultimately Jeff Okudah hasn't been it, and D. Alford is not that long-term option either. So need to find a younger guy who could potentially be that number two guy running with Terrell. Maybe it's Arnold. Then we get to the Pittsburgh Steelers at 54, and actually this is where we're going to have a trade, and this is another one of those in-conference ones where it's like, would Pittsburgh really want to help out Kansas City? Maybe, maybe not. For the right value, though, it's kind of hard not to, so I'm going to basically have Chiefs package up both their fifths, and they have 3-6, so sure, throw one of those 6-rounders in. A motley of day 3 selections while moving up 9 spots. Feels relatively fair there, so gave Pittsburgh an offer they couldn't refuse, and I'm going to give them Xavier Worthy. And I just looked at the cap hit for Marquez Valdes-Scantling for next year, and he's under contract for next year, but $14 million cap hit, and it was only a dead cap hit of $2 million. So basically, long story short, you could cut him and save $2 million while having Xavier Worthy be damn near the same player and fill that exact same role, while maybe even adding a little bit more. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier with Gabe Davis, Rome Odunze. Like, it feels like you might be getting the same guy, but a little bit more. I think Worthy brings a little bit more yards after the catch ability than an MVS does, and maybe even more intermediate work. But even just the yards after the catch component, and then still having that same guy who's an over-the-top burner and can consistently be someone safeties are keeping their eyes on. But you get to save $12 million against the cap and use that money on, who knows, maybe DeAndre Hopkins is available next free agency, right? Like you sign him with that $12 million you've saved. I love that type of thinking, and I hope that's something that Brett Veach considers. And Xavier Worthy, damn near is going to be the exact same player. So why not save the $12 million against the cap? Use that more offensive line, more corners, more other wide receivers or linemen, whatever, more edge rushers, whatever you need next free agency or whatever, veteran becomes available and is chasing a ring, really. So love that value. Let me know if you're a Chiefs fan, if you'd be down for this. Then we get to the Cleveland Browns at pick 55. I'm going to give him Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I would just love to pair up his anticipatory skills with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who has some of that, but Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is just like a great overhang defender. He's great in coverage, really stout against the run, despite maybe being a little undersized just because he's such a twitchy athlete and he can kind of evade offensive linemen. Then you give him the true prototypical Jeremiah Trotter Jr. It just feels like an upgrade over Anthony Walker in just about every sense, age, salary, and then actual play. So it feels like a big win there for the Cleveland Browns. Next, the Cowboys at 56. I'm going to give him Patrick Paul. Not the craziest of athletes, but just a proven, solid pass protector with really good hands, good play strength, and really stout or really strong anticipatory skills. When he guesses wrong, him, like Latham, a little bit of a penalty concern. Not as many penalties so far this season. Hopefully that continues to be the case. But when he guesses wrong, he tends to be a little handsy and becomes 1st and 20 for the offense. But other than that, man, he's rock solid. He's just not a god-tier athlete, but other than that, man, I think you're fine. If you draft Paul here, you're probably saying, hey, Paul's going to play left tackle, Tyler Smith's going to stick inside at guard, which I'm fine with. But if they want to go a different route, maybe you go Troy Fontenot, move him inside to guard, and Tyler Smith becomes your Tyron Smith replacement at left tackle. So you got options. A couple of different guys here on the board I considered. But I'm going to go with Patrick Paul, and let's keep Tyler Smith at left guard where he's playing like an elite player. Then Seattle at 57. Ultimately, this is kind of BPA, and a guy I just want to have in this video because I like him a lot. Howard Cross feels a lot like this year's Kalijah Kancey, a little undersized, but can kind of play over the center and passing situations, and he's just so quick out of his stance, but also really polished with his hands. A lot of those same things I loved about Kalijah Kancey, Howard Cross has got it, and he's just kind of fallen in this mock draft, and I almost just look at Howard Cross compared to Jarran Reed, and it almost feels like, okay, that's pretty much the same player, just way younger. Jarran Reed doesn't make a whole lot of money, so it's not like you're getting a huge cap savings like the MVS Xavier Worthy move, but you definitely get younger at the position. So pairing up Howard Cross with Draymond Jones, who's actually been a better run defender than pass rusher this year, that's a little weird. Didn't see that coming. But those two on the interior moving forward, that's an exciting tandem there for the Seahawks. And plus, I always give Seattle edge, so I wanted to give it a break for at least 1 week. Then we get to the Jags at 58. As we come towards the end of this mock draft, let's go Donovan Jackson. High-end run blocker, still a little bit of a work in progress in pass protection. Former 5-star recruit, and he's an awesome athlete. I just think I look at left guard for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they've got to get better there. So it may take a little bit for Jackson to grow as a pass protector, but it's worth that trade-off because you're automatically getting a better run blocker, So you're automatically getting an upgrade there, and at the worst, he's Ben Bartch as a pass protector, right? Like, it can't get any worse. So while also getting younger at the position, getting cheaper at the position, and at least giving yourself a swing of the bat as someone who could be better than a Ben Bartch in pass pro. Then we get to the Ravens at 59. That's where I'm going to have Blake Corum come off the board. Just haven't had a running back yet, so I always struggle with getting running backs taken just because I'm one of those guys who doesn't value him high enough. I know. But Corum to the Ravens? All right, I'm listening to that because that read option, like defensive end, just has no right decision. Lamar or Blake Corum. And Blake Corum at Michigan is just like, he's behind a good offensive line, don't get me wrong, but I mean, he's just like 8 yards a pop. Like his long plays are for 20, his short runs are for 3 to 4, but he's just kind of living consistently in the 8 to 10 yard range. He's got great vision, he's bouncy on his feet, lateral movement skills are there. Not an insane pass catcher, but like good enough there. And I think at this point you got to move on from J.K. Dobbins. It's just not going to happen. He's not going to stay healthy. Blake Corum kind of gives you almost the same things that you're looking for, but while resetting a rookie contract window and hopefully coming with a whole lot more health. So Blake Corum, I think right now is my RB1. I really like him a lot. He's just so stable and consistent. And I'm a Steelers fan, but for a Ravens perspective, I'd love to see that added to the offense and specifically into that backfield. All right, then we get to the San Francisco 49ers, and at pick 60, this is where I'm going to have Jordan Morgan come off the board. Feels a little low for him because he's had another great year at Arizona. He came back from the ACL injury, and he's looked awesome. He's just a little undersized, but great movement skills, and therefore I feel like he's a perfect fit for San Francisco. Play strength may be a concern, but right now it hasn't really popped so far. Maybe he just hasn't had the right edge rusher to challenge him there. But as long as play strength isn't like a total liability at the next level, this guy's got it, because I don't think there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done from his technique. And again, the movement skills are there to where this is like a plug-and-play upgrade over Colton McKivitz. Also thought about going interior, so another shout-out for Troy Fontenot. Really thought about Fontenot here to be that left guard of the future. Never felt like Aaron Banks was a fit there in San Francisco, so you could definitely look to make that type of move. Also, Donovan Jackson made it here. That would have been appealing. All right, then we get to the Miami Dolphins. This is where I'm going to have Christian Mahogany come off the board. He could have been an option for San Francisco as well. And ultimately, just after watching that Sunday night game where Miami's down to a backup center in Liam Eichenberg, who really should not be playing center, and they got Lester Cotton out there at left guard, jumping off sides like 2 of every 4 snaps, basically, he's got. They just got to get better there. And Mahogany comes with... He's played both guard spots at Boston College, and I think just like Zion Johnson, he'll get looks to play center once he gets to the Senior Bowl. Like, I legitimately think he will. And obviously, he missed all of the season prior because of an injury, but he's back on the field playing pretty well. So I'm looking at a guy who could play any of those 3 interior offensive line spots. So if something does happen to a Connor Williams, if something does happen to a Robert Hunt, whatever the case may be, you have a guy on roster who can immediately plug in. And I look at the Dolphins roster, and it's so well-rounded. Like, there's not many holes. So I just think about what could go wrong. And it's offensive line injuries and it's secondary injuries. So we've already seen the offensive line injuries kind of play a factor, specifically in that Philadelphia game. So I'm trying to get ahead of that curve and draft Mahogany here to be that interior backup, basically across the board, left all the way through right guard. Then we get the Detroit Lions at 62. I'm actually going to have the Lions trade back here. Sorry, Detroit fans, you are not going to make this selection. I'm going to have you trade with the Los Angeles Rams, partnering up a 4th and a 6th. Sure, we probably didn't even need to include the 6th, but whatever. Gets the trade done, and the Rams are moving up for a quarterback, so, will it let the trade go through? I don't think it will, so sorry, everybody. For whatever reason, it doesn't let me go through with those Rams trades. Let me just try it again real quick with just the 3rd and the 4th. I don't know. I'll come back if I can make this work. Man, that sucks. I might just have to put the Rams logo over top of this because I want this to be the Rams, and I'm going to have the Rams take Bo Nix. And again, it's going to show Detroit. I might just put the Rams logo in over this. But Bo Nix, I mean, he's old, yes, but he's been able to learn a new offense, and he's looked a whole lot better at Oregon than he has or he ever did at Auburn. And I'm not a huge Bo Nix guy, but for the Rams, how much longer can you ask Matt Stafford to play at the level that he is? That feels kind of tough. That feels like a tough expectation to have for the guy. And honestly, this might be the last year he plays at this level. And whether he keeps playing in the league or not, this might be the last year he plays at this level, if you know what I mean. And, Stetson Bennett, cute. That's a funny story. Sure, they both went to Georgia, and he's won some national titles. Didn't look, I guess, absolutely abysmal most of the preseason. There was one game where he definitely looked pretty rough. But I think Bo Nix is a better shot at potential long-term answer there. And again, he's older, so if you need him to start right away, I don't feel too bad about that. Good rushing ability. We're seeing him be able to orchestrate an offense. From Auburn to Oregon, he's been able to gain more anticipatory, been able to get better in those anticipatory throws, but really being able to decipher and take open throws. He'll just take that 1st and 10 hitch that I talked about I want Caleb Williams to take. Bo Nix is more than comfortable. He'll take those dink and dunks. He'll take advantage of Troy Franklin on a screen. He'll get the ball out to, Bucky Irving out of the backfield. He utilizes the short game really, really well, and then still has a big enough arm to make those deep throws. So kind of an intriguing prospect maybe for the Rams long term as that Matt Stafford replacement. So I want to talk about it here. Sorry, Detroit fans. Technically you got to make this pick, but really this is the Rams making this selection, and you get to move back, get extra assets. So let me know what you think about that. Pittsburgh at pick 63. As promised, I'm going to go back to the secondary. Javon Bullard come off the board. He's been playing mostly free safety this year for Georgia, but before that has split time basically between there and slot. And no matter what you do for Pittsburgh, I love Bullard for it. If he's going to play free safety, awesome. Get Minkah Fitzpatrick inside the sticks, get him work the middle of the field, kind of as that, robber defender, basically right at the first down marker, and just let him play off of QB's eyes and work the middle of the field. Kind of like what we saw Cam Bynum do on Monday night against the 49ers. That was in a 3 safety set, but they just had basically Cam Bynum lurk over the middle of the field. And if Minkah Fitzpatrick's doing that, thumbs up for me. I'm totally here for that. Or he plays slot corner, and he's your Mike Hilton replacement that the Steelers haven't found yet, and then it's Nate Wiggins and Joey Porter Jr. on the outside. So either way you spin it, you either got a really nice corner trio there, or Bullard's playing over the top, moving Minkah Fitzpatrick closer to the line of scrimmage and getting him more involved in every play, basically. So I love it either way you spin it. I'm totally here for it. If you're a Steelers fan, what's your preference there? Free safety or slot corner? And to round this video out, I'm going to give the Philadelphia Eagles a linebacker here, Cedric Gray. Gray's been fantastic yet again this season for UNC in coverage. So just love the idea of adding one more guy into that room that could do something like that. Nicholas Moore has been really, really good. Nakobe Dean, I think, generally pretty good. Still with room to get better. I think adding Cedric Gray just gives you a third linebacker, especially in passing situations, that you feel really good about having on the field. And also, we all know Nicholas Morrow's not a long-term answer, and where Dean's been pretty good, he hasn't been like absolutely spectacular. So still, don't want to like forfeit any potential upgrade. Don't let pretty good prevent you from getting great. And I think Cedric Gray, you're getting him at the end of the second round, so I'm not saying he's gonna be like all pro, all world or anything like that, but he can become a really nice impact player for a team that's going to be leading a lot of games, winning a lot of games, so therefore teams can be passing against them a lot. So I'd love to have that type of linebacker on the field. So long story short, just want to be able to show everybody each selection one more time. Again, pick 62 is the Los Angeles Rams drafting Bo Nix, not the Detroit Lions. Lions fans, do not come up my neck saying Jared Goff's an MVP and that you drafted Hendon Hooker. I know that is the Rams. If you're a Rams fan, I hate the pick. Valid, for sure. Bring it all my way. Which segues me perfectly into most important part about watching this video. I want to hear what you guys think down below in the comment section. Who went too high? Who went too low? Who's your favorite team? And did you like the fits I gave your squad, both position-wise, but also the player? I started this YouTube channel and did these mock drafts because I wanted to talk to other draft geeks and other football fans out there. So seriously, don't hold back. I responded just about every comment, or at least heart it and acknowledge it in some way. So let me hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. I'll be sure to respond to you in some way or fashion. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button. It seriously helps me and the channel out a ton, gets more eyes on these videos. And if you're new around here, want to see more football content, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Plenty more football content coming your way. But that's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.